Hi, it's Hillary from the Nina and I'm here with another art challenge. This week I'm going to be showing you how to do printing on styrofoam at home. And by printing I mean printmaking, so not just like a computer. So I've done a little sample here, a very wee one, and I used a piece of styrofoam to make this little image. And there's lots of cool things about this. I did a little bit of printing before when I did the leaf printing. And this is different because what we can do is we can make what's called prints, which are a very easily reproducible piece of artwork. So if I want to, I can print this a bunch of times and have a whole bunch of this image, and in a very short amount of time instead of having to draw this image over and over and over again. So that's what's really cool about it. It's a very ancient form of art. It's been done for a long time. I don't know the real number. And we're gonna do it today using stuff you can find at home mostly. So I'll show you what I've got here. Normally when we do like styrofoam printmaking, especially if we do it at the Nina, we use these like nice beautiful flat sheets of styrofoam, but you have to buy these at an art store. So what I'm gonna use today, which you might actually have at home, is a meat tray. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this in a second because this is a meat tray. I also have a pair of scissors, I've got some paper, different colors of paper, I've got a ballpoint pen, but you could use anything like a toothpick or anything that's pointy. I've got some black paint. You're going to want acrylic paint probably, or if you can get your hands on actual printmaking ink, that would be, the best. Watercolor paint will probably not work for this. So printmaking ink, a stamp pad thing would probably work just fine, but yeah, you want something that's a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to use a sponge. And then I got a couple other things here that I'll maybe talk about in a minute. So with your tray, styrofoam tray, if you're using a tray for meat, which I am, I think I had, ground beef or something, probably. You want to wash this sucker pretty well. So use soap, wash it. For real. I don't want anybody to get salmonella poisoning. It's fine if you clean it, but no cross-contamination, all that stuff. If it had like mushrooms in it, you should probably still wash it because you don't want to get mushroom junk all over your art, but this I washed really well. So I'm going to start by cutting this into kind of a nice square shape. And then I'm going to use that for drawing my design on. Whoa. And I've just cut the edges off. And I have one side that has these little stampy doodads on it that tell you can't recycle this. And then the flat side. I'm going to use the flat side. Ooh, I think this had fish in it. Gross. Okay, so this image here, the black, this is a little bit complicated. The black areas are the parts where the styrofoam was high. So if you think about like a mountain range, the high parts are going to be getting, like the mountain peaks are going to be getting all of the paint, and the valleys are not going to get the paint. So on this little thing that I made, all of the parts that I pressed into the styrofoam stay white, and all of the parts that I left alone stayed black. So you'll see what this looks like in a second here. But what this means that if you're trying to do a picture that has like a light sky and a black mountain, you're gonna wanna almost do the reverse of what you would think you have to do. So I'll show you what that means in a second. So I think what I'm gonna do is a seahorse, and I'm going to do sort of a light colored seahorse on a dark background. Which means that the seahorse parts I'm going to be kind of pressing in, and the background parts I'm going to leave alone. So I'm going to start by really gently kind of sketching out my seahorse shape. So anytime you press into the styrofoam, it's going to leave a mark. So even if you just scratch with your fingernail, that will show up as a mark in your drawing later. So I'm pressing really lightly because I don't want to add a whole bunch of stuff to my thing. I forget what seahorses look like. This looks kind of like a seahorse so far. And that's really all we need. It's just, the basic sort of seahorse shape. There's a tail. I'm gonna make this one hanging onto some seaweed because I think it's cute when they do that. There he is. Okay, there we go. There's a little seahorse. And then seahorse is fun because I can add a lot of texture. I think they have like little fins there. They're weird little guys. Okay, so I kind of have my little sketch here. I've got my seahorse, and so all of the seahorse details I'm going to color in are going to be lighter, and then the seaweed I think I'll make lighter as well. And the background I'm going to leave black, and you'll see how this works in a second. Okay, so I'm going to color in some parts that I want to be light. And the parts that I'd like to stay dark, I'm going to leave alone. Because that's what I said I'm going to do. And that's how this makes sense. Okay, so it looks really weird because I'm using a pen. And the pen makes it so that it looks black. Perhaps this is unnecessarily complicated, but I think you'll be fine. So I'm going to draw in some lines here. The more textures you use with this, the cooler it looks. And so you'll get to see what this looks like in just a second here. Okay, so I'm going to put some lines in the fins there. And again, it doesn't have to actually color. So if you are using like a toothpick or something, the important part is not the fact that this is being colored in black. The important part is that it is being pressed in. So I'm going to make some like little scales or what have you kind of thing. And it kind of looks like it has bricks on it. That's fine. It can be a masonry seahorse. This is, and if you press all the way through the styrofoam, that's fine too. Sometimes if you have like really big areas that you want to leave white, I actually just cut those off with scissors. But in this case, I don't. Okay, it's just gonna be kind of spotty, I think. This is, and I'm really having to press into this stuff because this is pretty thick styrofoam, so it's a real workout. But don't get lazy. You have to do the whole thing. I'm gonna do it. Maybe I'll just make some little polka dots over here. This is way easier. I'm not being lazy, I'm being artistic. So I've almost finished all of my mark making. I colored in all the places that I want to remain white, even though they look black right now. And I just wanted to show you a couple little fun things I was doing to add some different marks. So I'm just using a ballpoint pen to make my marks. And when the ink part is clicked in, there's like a little hole that I can use to kind of make some cool like bubbly marks. And if I press really hard, it makes a big bubble. If I press lightly, it makes a small little circle on here. And I'm really interested to see how well those show up. So I'm gonna do some of those. And I also just use my fingernail to put some kind of like, you know, sort of watery, flowy marks in the background. Okay, so now I'm ready to put the paint on it. And I'm gonna just kind of at this point get my paper ready because once the paint is on it, this doesn't dry as fast as like printmaking ink does, or at least our printmaking ink that we use here at the Nina. But you do kind of want to be ready with something. So I've got a couple sheets of paper because I'm going to actually print this 3 times because I can, because it's a print. And you know, what's the fun in making this print if you're not going to make multiples? So I'm just going to put some paint on a palette sort of surface. You can use whatever. You can use extra styrofoam or a piece of wax paper, whatever. Just enough to kind of, I want to be able to spread this paint out a little bit. And then I'm going to use my sponge. And I'm just going to get kind of I don't want it to be too globby. So I want it to be like an even coating on the sponge, but not too globby. So just kind of, you can kind of see I've got it on there. And then I'm going to start very gently kind of dabbing it on the top. And I want to be pretty thorough about this. So I'm not wiping it because I don't want it to get into the grooves that I've made, into the sort of depressions on the styrofoam. I just want it to stay on the top. So if you think back to the mountains and valleys thing that I said earlier, I'm putting it on the mountain peaks and not in the valleys. Okay, now I have to make sure I don't get it all over my fingers. So I'm trying to just kind of do a good job getting it all over here. And I'm trying to make it pretty even. I think it looks pretty good. I dropped it all over my fingers. Okay, so now I'm going to move it to kind of a clean spot on my table. I don't have a clean spot. I'm going to get another piece of paper and put it down here. There, now it's clean. And I'm going to put my print down there. And then I'm going to take my paper, and I found this cool red paper. I think this is actually origami paper, but I'm not sure, it still looks cool. And I'm going to really carefully line it up. This paper is actually too small, but that's fine too. On here. And then, now I put the paint side up and the paper down. I just find that's a little bit easier to kind of get everything lined up. Now you can use your hands to just kind of rub this. If you have a brayer, you can do this and roll it, or you can use a rolling pin, but you might get paint on your rolling pin. So I think I'm just going to use my hands. But you have to be, you know, think about getting all the edges and all the corners and kind of putting equal pressure all over the whole thing. You want to make sure you don't move it once it's on, because then it'll get this weird sort of double image. I'm pressing all the corners and all the edges, and it feels like it's pretty well stuck on there. This paper's quite thin, so it's doing some weird wrinkly stuff. And then I'm going to pull it off, and we're going to see what happened. Ooh, that's very cool. So that turned out really well. Even those little tiny wee dots that I did, look, you can kind of see them. And all the marks that I even made with my fingernail showed up, and all the seahorse marks showed up. So that's one. I'm going to do this a couple more times because I can. The styrofoam will kind of lose its, it'll kind of get damaged over time if you do it a lot of prints. You know, if you're mass producing this, like, you're not going to be able to do like 200 prints on this because it'll just get worn out. But this should last you for, you know, a while, especially if you're careful with it. You can reprint this quite a few times. But it's not like a wood block or something. Like, you could print that stuff till the cows come home. Nothing's going to damage that. Styrofoam's a little bit more fragile. Okay, let's do a yellow one. Lining it up. Uh-oh. I didn't put it on a clean piece of paper. I might get some weird artifacts on there. Oh well. I forgot. There we go. Let's see this one. Whoop. Very cool. That looks good too. And then I think I'm going to do one more. So one thing that I wanted to point out was you'll notice that these are mirror images of each other. So I'm going to hold these up, and you can see that the original drawing that I did is facing this direction, but the print is facing the other direction. And that is because we are making a big stamp. And if you've ever used stamps before, you know that whatever you stamp is going to stamp backwards. So that means that if you want to write words, you have to write all the letters backwards and also the whole word backwards. So I personally like to not do words because it's way easier. So just make sure that when you go to draw something, you remember that everything you do is going to be a mirror image of itself. And that can be kind of fun. That kind of adds to some of the surprise that happens when you get to see what it looks like. So I've done one more print. This one is kind of cool because you can kind of see where the sponge marks are actually on here. And that's a really pretty sort of little accident. But yeah, this is a really fun project and a really great way to not throw out all that poor styrofoam. Obviously, you know, avoid buying it if you can, but this is a fun thing to do with it. So yeah, send us your pictures if you try this, and we're excited to see what you make.